Welcome back to 5 Minute Fantasy Football, presented to you by the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. We're doing fantasy football previews. We've almost done all the teams. Today, we're going to do the NFC North, starting with Chicago Bears. We got Mike Clay's projections, sleeper ADP, and we're going to talk about the fantasy finishes, the sleeper value, and make sure to give you guys some advice for your drafts this weekend. Of course, before we do that, go to Underdog Fantasy, use promo code FFSGPN so they know we sent you. Get a few more best ball drafts in, and don't forget about their pick'ems. Well, Caleb Williams, Mike has most quarterbacks projected for 15 games. He's going to be the starter week 1, and he's got him finishing as QB 17, which is a little bit higher than where he's currently being drafted, but right around that range. He's got Williams finishing with 3,536 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. On the ground, 62 attempts, 311 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So not a lot of rushing, but enough. And if we saw a little bit more rushing, maybe you see a little bit higher of them than QB 17. Williams comes into a great situation. This team, they didn't finish as the worst team in the NFL last year, but they still had the number 1 pick. And so they had, I think, 7 wins last year. Their defense got a lot better as the season went on. And this offseason, they've crushed it. They got Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, and they got DJ Moore as part of that trade last year. And so they've really set Caleb Williams up for success. I know there's some Justin Fields truthers out there and wish that Justin Fields got a shot, but Caleb Williams was the right decision. Not only contractually did it make sense for money-wise, but we know Caleb Williams is the better quarterback and has the higher ceiling than Justin Fields. As far as fantasy football, Caleb Williams, he may not be rushing for 1,000 yards, but I do think he's going to be successful year 1. And that you can trust him as a late round quarterback option if you want to go with that, or if you want to get him as a QB2 in your Superflex leagues. DeAndre Swift, he's the leading rusher, but it is a split backfield. You have 184 carries to Swift, 104 to Herbert, and 75 to Roschon. 833 rushing yards for Swift. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns. And then as far as receiving, 35 receptions for 249 on 45 targets, only 1 receiving touchdown. Without much receiving, it's really going to be hard for him to get inside the top 15. We haven't seen Swift be a pure runner and take over any backfield that he's been at. And he's been behind some really good offensive lines. And so he's been behind the Philadelphia Eagles and Detroit offensive lines. And usually he's being drafted in the top 10, top 15. And he's disappointed you. Well, now he's probably going to finish right around where he's priced at. So I'm okay with taking him at RB 2021, but I'm not thinking I'm getting a tremendous value. I don't think he's going to finish much higher than that because exactly of what I said. He's going to split with Herbert. And whether you like Herbert or not, he's been on the team and he is a good runner. And so Herbert could also take in some of that goal line work, which could be a problem for Swift. Khalil Herbert, he's getting drafted right around the RB 60 range. Mike has him finishing as RB 54. If Swift were to go down, Herbert would likely, be the guy. And so he could be a late round value for you, but not someone necessarily targeting. He's got Herbert getting 475 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, 12 receptions, 87 yards, and finishing as RB 54. As far as the receivers, this will be interesting because all 3 of these receivers are being drafted pretty high. And we saw this last year with the Seattle Seahawks, and it didn't work out. Like, you were pretty disappointed if you got JSN and, a lot of similar narratives. We got 2 veteran guys. Well, the third guy is going to get 3rd or 4th string corners. He's going to dominate, and it's going to be awesome. Well, it didn't really pan out that way. And you had a rookie quarterback. I just don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be able to support everybody. And, Rome Odunze is the rookie. He's unproven. Keenan Allen has been a PPR machine, and DJ Moore has been a very consistent player. So I just don't know how this is going to work out as far as fantasy. And Caleb Williams has said he's going to throw the ball to the open guy, and it could be a different guy every week. DJ Moore, he's got DJ Moore finishing. Mike has DJ Moore finishing as the wide receiver 19. Which is a little lower than where he's being currently being drafted, but right around that same range. He's got him finishing with 123 targets, is 77 receptions, 1,047 yards, and 7 TDs. For Keenan Allen, he's got 123 targets as well. 84 receptions, 882 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Then Roma Dunze, he's got him 100 targets, catches 60 of them for 804 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. Again, very even split for all three of these guys, which kind of, hurts them all. DJ Moore doesn't really have the upside you would like. Keenan Allen finishing at 34 would not be very exciting for, for dynasty managers, and then for fantasy football managers. And then Roma Dunze finishing as the 46. So not too far off of their ADP, but all of them are a little bit lower than where their current ADP is. And then Cole Kmet, he's being drafted right here at tight end 15, but that's what Mike has him finishing as. And, if anyone's going to be the loser out of this, it's going to be Cole Kmet. I mean, DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, all those guys come in, and all those guys are going to earn targets. And Cole Kmet is just he's not going to be a consistent option, being 4th or 5th on the pecking order. Mike has him projected for 58 receptions, 519 yards, 4 touchdowns, finishing as tight end 14. Now we're talking Detroit Lions. This team is, they're becoming America's team, Cowboys fans. Everyone's cheering for the Lions because of their drought. I mean, this team is, if you're a loyal Lion fan, you've gone through some tough times, and I think people really respect that. And people really like Dan Campbell and what they've done here. Brad Holmes has done a nice job with the roster, and Dan Campbell he's a kneecap biting football guy. And then Jared Goff, his story being kind of thrown away by the Los Angeles Rams, and now he's over here with the Super Bowl contending Detroit Lions. Mike has Jared Goff projected as the QB 22. He's being drafted a lot higher than that. People really like that opening season schedule, and they really like this offense, especially with Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator. One of the biggest things that happened for this Lions team is Ben Johnson staying. He's got Jared Goff projected for 3,755 yards, 23 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and on the ground, 51 yards and 2 touchdowns, finishing as QB 22. Again, Goff is a safe QB2, but with how good this team is at rushing the ball, especially at the red zone, you could have some games where it really goes away and disappoints. We'd love to see him, with 250 to 300 yards and 2 to 3 touchdowns every week, but it fluctuates. Some weeks he's going to have 300 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. The other weeks he's going to have 250 yards and 0 passing touchdowns because David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs scored a bunch on the ground. So it's something to look at. Jahmyr Gibbs, he is battling a bit of a hamstring injury, but Mike has him projected high, and they say he's going to be ready to go week 1. And Gibbs is it's a split backfield as far as the carries, but he is the lead guy. Gibbs is 189 attempts, 875 yards rushing, and 8 rushing touchdowns. And through the air is really where he does his damage. 68 targets, catches 51 of them for 375 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he's got him finishing as the RB7, which is exactly where he's being drafted right now. A lot of people have, the conversation of is it him or Kyron Williams or Saquon? And where do you land on that? David Montgomery is the second running back, and he's got him finishing as RB23, which is a really good finish, especially for he's being drafted outside of that. He's being drafted in the 30s. Right now, he's got Montgomery for 182 carries, which is 7 less than Gibbs, 798 yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, and in the air, 22 receptions for 163 and 1. So David Montgomery is the guy that you can get. It's a cheap piece of this backfield. If Gibbs were to go down, Montgomery would be a smash play. But even on a weekly basis with this, this guy scoring almost a touchdown a week last year, you can see very similar production in 2024. Monroe St. Brown, he's a stud. He needs to be mentioned up there with those top guys. And part of that is because of the target share. This guy has a monster target share, and Mike is projecting for that to continue. 153 targets. Not seen on here the Tim Patrick signing, The team just signed Tim Patrick today, so he's not on here, but he will factor in. And Donovan Peoples-Jones is out. So you'll see him out, Tim Patrick in, and Tim Patrick might earn a little bit more targets than what Donovan Peoples-Jones, but it should not affect Amon-Ra St. Brown. St. Brown collects 110 of those for 1,265 yards and 7 touchdowns, finishing as the PPR wide receiver 5. You can get him late in the first round in your drafts, and sometimes he's even slipping into the second round. But typically, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going there right around the 8, 9, 10 spot ahead of Garrett Wilson. So that's the conversation: Amon-Ra St. Brown or Justin Jefferson or Garrett Wilson. The tight end position, Mike has tight end 1, Sam Laporta. Last year, Laporta defeated Travis Kelce and took him off of his throne as the top tight end with a late season push by just a couple points. This year, he's got him finishing as the tight end 1. He's got 84 receptions for 861 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns. We'd like to, we saw all the touchdowns last year. We'd like to see a little bit more yards, a little bit more air yards. But the targets are going to be there. One of the key performance indicators is, are you going to be number 1 or 2 on your team in targets? And he is number 2 on the team in targets projected by Mike and by almost everybody. 119 targets is definitely going to get him a top 6 finish. My only concern with Laporta is how high he's being drafted. Is Laporta that much better than Mark Andrews, where you're drafting him 2 rounds higher? Is he that much better than Kittle, who's going 3 rounds, 4 rounds? Kittle and Pitts are going 4 rounds later. There's a lot of really good players in the 2nd and 3rd round, and I don't know if I'm in on Laporta at that price. But let me know what you think about the Detroit Lions. All right, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Last year, they really fooled everybody. Everyone expected them to stink and to be in the QB market this year. Instead, they were signing Jordan Love to a monster extension, and the Packer fans are, Browns fans and Jets fans are so jealous of the last 30 years. The Packers have had Brett Favre, and they've had Aaron Rodgers. And they also had, Bart Starr back in the day. I mean, they have a Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks that everybody dreams of. And Packers fans, you're a 40, 50-year-old Packer fan, and you don't even know what it's like to have a bad quarterback. And that's just insane. Jordan Love projected for 3,674 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions, finishing as the QB 12. On the ground, 211 yards with 3 touchdowns. This right here is a guy that I'm very comfortable with him as a late round quarterback. If you were to get Jordan Love in the 10th round, and you could build a really, really good team around that, I'm good with that. And some of these guys that have similar production being drafted 5 rounds higher. So if you want to get a good quarterback, Jordan Love and Brock Purdy are in that range where I really like, because I like to get an early tight end and build the team up and then plop that quarterback right in. And with someone like Jordan Love, where he's being drafted, is great. As far as the running backs, Josh Jacobs, he's been very inefficient the last year. But we've seen so much volume with him. Does this team deploy more of a 2-back system? We'll see. A.J. Dillon is on season-ending IR. Marshawn Lloyd is potentially going on the PUP with a hamstring injury. So Josh Jacobs, the only show in town. I mean, they're going to bring in some guys. There's a lot of cuts. There's a lot of names that could be floating out there, and we could see somebody else. But as of now, Josh Jacobs is going to be the guy. And they have him, Mike has him projected for 246 attempts, 969 yards, and 7 touchdowns, 37 receptions, 284 yards, and 1 TD. The way this contract is laid out, the Packers have all the incentive in the world to run the brakes off of Jacobs. They could get out of his contract next year. They have an out on his 4-year contract. They have an out next year with basically 0 dead money, and they could turn the keys over to Marshawn Lloyd or just draft another running back. And so Josh Jacobs could be in line for a ton of volume this year, and Mike has him projected for a ton. 246 rushes and 37 receptions. That's one of the most projected touches that Mike has, period. Christian Watson, he's got him as the top projected receiver, but he's right there, almost tied with Jaden Reed. He's got Watson finishing as wide receiver 40, Reed finishing as wide receiver 41, Romeo Doubs finishing as wide receiver 68. The targets 95, 95, and 78. So very spread out, which makes it very difficult to figure out which one you want to draft. And so at that point, you might just want to take the cheapest guy or the cheaper guy. Jaden Reed's the highest, most expensive. And so you might want to go with Watson, who brings a ton of upside. Hopefully he can stay healthy. But if you're going to get the same production, you'd rather the guy 3 rounds cheaper. And then, of course, Romeo Doubs is there. Christian Watson, Mike has him projected for 54 receptions, 833 yards, 8 touchdowns. Jaden Reed, he's got 62 receptions, 759 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Romeo Doubs, 49 receptions, 589 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And here's the problem. They have Dontavian Wicks, 72 receptions, 72 targets, 47 receptions, 567 yards, and 4 receiving touchdowns, finishing as wide receiver 75. So that's the problem, is they have this really split 4 ways, and then the tight ends on top of it. You have Tucker Kraft is finishing as the top tight end. He's got him finishing as tight end 25. Luke Musgrave finishing as tight end 30. Basically splitting it, but 53 targets for Kraft, 38 receptions, 372 yards, and 3 TDs. Luke Musgrave, 47 targets, 34 receptions, 337 yards, and 2 TDs. Now let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings. This is a team with Justin Jefferson. He's a top 5 pick in your fantasy football drafts. And a lot of people are wondering, what do I do with Justin Jefferson? Should I take him on Amon-Ra St. Brown or Garrett Wilson? Last year, he was on pace for over 2,000 yards with Josh Jacobs and Nick Mullins. He's been quarterback proof. He's not had a lot. It's a very short resume, but he's been quarterback proof. And so I'm not shying away from him. I'm confidently drafting him if he falls to me in the 7 or 8 spot. I think he's going to be really good, especially in your PPR leagues. But the quarterback position it's difficult. You expected to have JJ McCarthy for most of the year. Now you get Sam Darnold. Nick Mullins is there. He's got Sam Darnold projected for 13 games, 17 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 3,126 yards. But he's got Nick Mullins playing a few games. This is Mike Clay's projections. Sam Darnold finishing as a QB 30. He's really not worth being drafted in your leagues. Rushing touchdowns, he's got him for 49 attempts, 180 and 2. He's got Nick Mullins coming in, slinging it, 4 games, 1,092 yards, 5 TDs, 5 interceptions. We hope Darnold doesn't get hurt. We hope Darnold can play well. Maybe he's the guy this year. We saw Geno. We saw Baker Mayfield. Maybe Sam Darnold is the veteran that, goes and surprises us, but we'll see. Speaking of veterans, Aaron Jones goes from the Packers to Vikings, and we really want to see him continue to be a good fantasy asset, but we'll see. Aaron Jones is projected to split carries, 161 carries to him, 157 to Ty Chandler. Aaron Jones finishing as RB19. He's got 756 yards rushing, 5 rushing TDs, 43 receptions on 60 targets, 342 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I really like Aaron Jones because of the quarterback. No matter if it's Mullins or Darnold, expect some checkdowns. And Aaron Jones, he's always done a lot of work in the passing game. And if you were to get him over 60 targets, get him in the 80, 90 target range because of a lot of checkdowns, that could be great in your PPR formats for a guy that can do a lot of damage after the catch. Mike has him finishing as RB19, which is, a little bit higher than where he's currently being drafted. I think he's RB23. Then Ty Chandler finishing as RB43. He's, a little bit of a sleeper. If Aaron Jones were to get hurt, would have been nice. But again, we just don't know how high-powered this offense is going to be. Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, very hyper-focused on those two for the targets. 162 targets for Jefferson, 114 for Addison. For Jefferson, Mike has him projected for 106 catches, 1,355 yards, and 7 touchdowns, finishing as the wide receiver 5. As far as Jordan Addison, he's got him projected to finish as wide receiver 40. And he's got 70 receptions, 875 yards, and 5 touchdowns. We don't know if a suspension is going to happen for Addison. We cannot, predict those things. Maybe it happened next year, maybe this year. But there really is no third receiver on the Vikings that you're concerned about. TJ Hawkinson. Right now, it's there's a lot of buzz that Robert Tunyon was trending on Sleeper that he could be the starter to start the season. Maybe he is, but Mike has him projected for basically nothing. 4 receptions for 38 yards. He's got Johnny Munt projected to be the guy other than Hawkinson. But Hawkinson's the conversation point. Mike has him projected for 12 games. It means he's going to start the season on the pup. And then he's got 91 targets, catches 64 of them for 614 yards and 3 touchdowns, finishing as tight end 13. So if he can finish his tight end 13 in 12 games, he's going to give you some good performances. But again, there's just so many question marks here. How well does he come back off of the knee injury? How does Sam Darnold do in this offense? Do you see Nick Mullins? And what are the Vikings what are they looking like midway through the season when Hawkinson's coming back? So it was a multi-ligament knee injury super late in the year. I'm not interested in Hawkinson. But I will say this, he is going late enough in drafts that you can draft him and stash him. And if he goes on the pup or the IR, then you can put him in that IR spot. And, that would be just a stash play. And then you can pick somebody else off of waiver and then ride whoever it is, for the season until Hawkinson gets healthy. Get a later round tight end and then have Hawkinson there at the end. And you can use Hawkinson as a trade piece when he comes off the IR, or if you need a tight end, which sometimes you do, you'll have Hawkinson there. But again, I'm not going to pay up for him. If he falls to me in a spot where I'm like, you know what, nobody else here has the kind of upside that Hawkinson has, then I'll go and snag him. But probably would have to be outside of the top 10 rounds, top 9 rounds. So, all right, this is the NFC North. This is 5-Minute Fantasy Football. As always, good luck this season.